جزاك الله خير. شكرا. تفضل. تفضل. Go ahead. Go ahead. Whatever you have. You have questions? Go ahead. If you have questions, go ahead. طيب بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. خير إن شاء الله. Perhaps we have a few questions. Let's see if we can take them tonight. By Allah's permission, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Khalid.
What is the absolute minimum of an object being a sutra, considered a sutra?
Question says, what is the absolute minimum of an object being a sutra? The absolute minimum. Some of the people of knowledge say it could be a line. It could be a piece of tape on the carpet. It could be a line drawn in the sand. Some may say it could be one's kufi, one's hat. Some of the people of knowledge, they say this. That which should be done, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, is that you should make sure that your sutra is at least the length of one's arm. Or at least the length of one's forearm. At least. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. As the Prophet ﷺ was asked about sutratul musalli, and he says, mithlu mu'kharatir rahl, or mu'akharatir rahl. Or kama ja'a fi hadhihi riwayah. Hadith says that the Prophet ﷺ said that it's like the back of a saddle, the back of a rider's saddle, and not necessarily the saddle that you may see in museums or books or in movies, cowboy movies, Indian movies, cowboys and Indians. You see a saddle on a horse. No, but it's talking about the saddle that was used in Arabia in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the saddle that was on a camel's back and not a horse's back. If you go on hadithdisciple.com, I think maybe last year we did a video about narrations of the sutra, reading from the book of Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah, Sifu Salat al-Nabi Kama Taraha, the description of the Prophet's prayer, and we read from that chapter, and I believe that the thumbnail or the picture of the video is an old-fashioned camel saddle, an old-fashioned camel saddle, in which you can see the back of the saddle is a piece of wood that's sticking up, and it's roughly the length of one's forearm. That's what's meant by a saddle, a rahl. Everybody understand this? But in America, if you ever had horses or your grandfather had horses, you go to the stable, they have a saddle. The saddle is not erect at all. It's totally, relatively flat. Everybody clear on this? So let's say roughly like this high. Mathalan. Roughly. A little longer, a little shorter. Roughly. It should be at least this length. And if you can have it even longer than that, then that's even better. The length of a chair. The length of someone's back sitting down. Something like this. But the general rule is that you should have something in front of you. That thing should be known and it should be clear. Khairan inshallah. As far as the rulings of the sutra, is it mandatory or not? Can someone walk in front of you? Then that has been discussed. And inshallah ta'ala, that will be discussed in another session. But that's the length that it should be. Wallahu alam. Adam.
Sheikh, a brother from prison sent a question. What is the ruling for them in regards to masturbation, especially for brothers doing very long sentences or even life? And what kind of advice can you give them on how to deal with, the sexual urges while they're in prison?
Question comes from our brothers who are incarcerated regarding masturbation and their sexual desires, and some brothers who may have life. Before we answer the question, alhamdulillah, more than a few years back, some years back, we compiled a book about different rulings of incarcerated Muslims, different excerpts from the kalam of the people of the past, and different sporadic, spontaneous fatwa and hakam from the different mashayikh of Mecca and of Medina. Walillahi alhamd, we put out that book. I believe it's called The Road to Redemption. Naam, The Road to Redemption. You can find that book in the bookstores. And before that, before I put together that book, there was the first volume of the book that was put together, okay, called Rulings of Incarcerated Muslims. Rulings of Incarcerated Muslims. Walillahi book is well known. Jazakallahu khairan. My friend, our brother in Islam, Dr. Tahir White, he compiled the first volume, and I put together the second volume. So if the brothers can get their hands on those two books, it'll be very beneficial, because there's all types of rulings that are specifically addressed or specifically asked for brothers in incarceration, and also sisters as well. But obviously, we as brothers, we have more contact with the brothers than the sisters. The sisters locked up too. So if you can go back to those two books, it'll be very beneficial. And in there, you'll find the rulings of masturbation being mentioned, and a load of other etiquettes, do's and don'ts, narrations, and things like this in those two books. And inshallah ta'ala, the books, I believe they're in Dawud Salam. You should be able to order them online, volume 1 and volume 2. As far as the PDF, I don't have the PDF. It was a very long time ago, and I don't have any contact with the publisher or the brother who printed the book. Walillahi alhamd. Alhamdulillah for that. At the end of the day, if you can find a book, inshallah, it's very good for the brothers and sisters who are in jail. And the book is also beneficial for the people that are in jail as well. So that's first and foremost. As far as the specific question with regards to masturbation, then it's a very commonly asked question, something that's posed all of the time. And the people who do pose the question have the bravery to ask the question. And many people are just too afraid, too shy, too embarrassed to ask the question about something that is a reality of life, and that is to masturbate for men and for women. At the end of the day, I wouldn't advise those brothers to perform masturbation. I would advise them to avoid performing masturbation and stay away from it. That's the best thing to do, is to stay away from it. Inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is it haram or is it halal? The people of knowledge who came before me, that were greater than me, bigger than me, they themselves, they have reservations on the issue. Many of them said that masturbation is permissible, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's your private part. It's your fluid. Let it go if you want. One of the pious predecessors said, as it can be found in the Musannaf of Abd Razak, he says, "Huwa ma'aka fa'ariqhu in shi'ta." In literal translation, he said, it's your water, so let it go if you want. That's what he said. And it's not zina, it's not fornication, it's your own personal thing that you want to do. And some of the ulama as well, they said that it's not haram because there's nothing that proves that it is haram. It's nothing that states clearly and directly that it is haram. So that's the view of some of the ulama of the Salaf and of the Khalaf, the early generations and the later generations. And others had the exact opposite opinion, the exact opposite view. And they said that masturbation falls under the generality of Allah Azza wa Jalla's statement, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ إِلَّا عَلَى أَزْوَاجِهِمْ أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُهُمْ فَإِنَّهُمْ غَيْرُ مَلُومِينَ فَمَنِ ابْتَغَى وَرَاءَ ذَلِكَ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْعَادُونَ. Allah says in Surah Al-Mu'minun, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ. Allah says in the 23rd chapter of the Quran, and those who protect their furuj, they protect their private organs, their sexual organs. They protect their chastity or chastity. They protect themselves from this secret place. إِلَّا عَلَى أَزْوَاجِهِمْ, except for from their wives. أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُهُمْ, or that which their right hands possess. In other words, their concubines. Everybody understand this? A woman that they owned in permissible, lawful, Islamic concubinage, he is allowed to have relations with this woman. Allah says there's nothing wrong with that. He is praising the believers. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. Indeed, the believers are successful. He's praising them. Who are the believers? الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ. Those who have submission in their salah. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنِ اللَّغْوِ مُعْرِضُونَ. And those who turn away from foul talk. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِلزَّكَاةِ فَاعِلُونَ. Those who perform and give zakah. And Allah says, and those who protect their private parts. So that's the asl. Allah mentioned that the asl is to protect one's farj in Arabic, and has two meanings. One is your actual private part, to protect it from being seen from someone who should not see it. And the second meaning is to protect one's honor and one's chastity, not to fall into these desires. So that is the what? That's the asl. Allah mentioned that first. Then He says, illa, except for. Everybody understand this? And it's a well-known Quranic style. We say, La ilaha illallah. La ilaha. There's no God. Illallah. Except for Allah. That's a stronger statement. If I say no one's in the masjid except for Abu Sa'id, and then it's clear in your mind that Abu Sa'id is what? In the masjid and nobody else. That's not the same as me saying Abu Sa'id is in the masjid. Abu Sa'id is the only one in the masjid. No one's in the masjid except for Abu Sa'id. No one can come and talk to me except for Usama. Everybody understand this? So the asl is that no one is supposed to what? Talk to me. Everybody with me? The rule of thumb. Everybody with me or not? The asl is that what? No one is supposed to talk to me except for kada. So Allah says they protect their private areas. Then He makes an exception. Illa ala azwajihim. Except for someone who is your wife. Everybody understand this? Like Allah says in the Quran, فَانْكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ مَثْنَى وَالثُّلَاثَ وَرُبَاعَ. Allah says, marry women who are pleasing to you. And He never ever says one wife. Be monogamous. No. Mathna, He says two women. Start off with two. Wathulath, 3. Waruba, 4. Then Allah says, and if you're afraid that you won't be just, فَوَاحِدَةً أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. Allah says, then just one wife. Or that which your right hands possess. I don't know how a Muslim in 2017 who's reading the Quran can say what that poor sister said at Hunter College, and those poor brothers as well. May Allah guide them all. How can you say something like this? Are you not reading the Quran? Are we reading a different Quran? Am I reading a different book than you're reading? Allah clearly says, well, that what your what? Right hands possess. And then someone say, no, you can't say that. That's not true. That's incorrect. There's no such thing as a sex slave in Islam. And Allah clearly says something and you say what? Other than that. That's unfortunate. At the end of the day, Allah Azza wa Jalla, He started off with what? 2. That's the asl. If you can't, then understand this principle. So Allah says those who protect their private parts, except for their wives or that which their right hands possess. These people have no problem. Allah says, فَمَنِ ابْتَغَى وَرَاءَ ذَلِكَ. Those who want something other than that, your wife or your concubine, فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْعَادُونَ. Allah says, then they are the wrongdoers. They are the mu'tadun. They are the oppressors. They are transgressing the boundaries. So Allah never mentioned masturbation. Allah mentioned your wife or your concubine. That's it. Everybody understand this? So these ulama, they say that it falls under not protecting the farj. Also, the famous narration, the well-known hadith of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, in which the Prophet ﷺ commanded the youth to get married. He says, get married. Ya ma'ashar al-shabab. Get married. And then he says, if you can't get married, even though marriage is good for your gaze, it's good for your private part, it's good for your body, for your mind. ذَلِكَ أَزْكَى لَهُمْ. Allah says in the Quran, قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ وَيَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُمْ. Tell the believing men to lower their gaze and to protect their furuj. Once again, Allah says, why? ذَلِكَ أَزْكَى لَهُمْ. He says, that's pure for them. It's pure for your mind. When you look at everything, your mind becomes impure and dirty and filthy. Your eyes, your ears, your heart, your pocket, you pay for things, you buy things, you go here, you do this, you become defiled. Inna Allah khabirun bima yasnaun. Allah says, because Allah is all aware of that which they do. So therefore, Ibn Mas'ud, he narrated, the Prophet says, get married because it's better for you, it's pure for you, it's better for you. And if you can't, فَعَلَيْهِ بِالصَّوْمِ فَإِنَّهُ لَهُ وِجَاء. He says, if you can't get married, then it's like castration. It's like crushing a man's testicles, or cutting them off, or removing everything. How someone becomes a eunuch, in which he has little to no sexual desire whatsoever. Little to no sexual desires. The Prophet says that's what fasting does. So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah in Fath al-Bari, he said, comment on this hadith, وَفِيهِ تَرْكُ الْإِسْتِمْنَاءِ. He says, the Prophet ﷺ, in this hadith, we benefit from it, Ibn Hajar said, is to leave off masturbation. لِأَنَّهُ أَيْسَرُ مِنَ الصَّوْمِ. He says, because it's easier to masturbate than to fast. And that's what the Prophet did not what? He did not say, فَعَلَيْهِ بِالْإِسْتِمْنَاءِ فَلْيَسْتَمْنُوا. He didn't say you can masturbate if you can't get married. He says either marry or fast. So there's an issue of khilaf among the ulama of Islam. Some of the people of knowledge, they say, some of them they say, that if a person fears of falling to zina or fears of falling to something even worse than that, then he can masturbate, which is the lesser of the two harms. Which is the lesser of the two harms. So we have three main views, or two main views. Some say it's halal, some say it's totally haram, and some say it's permissible in times of need or necessity, or it's permissible to take the lesser of the what? Two harms. Now that's the summary of the issue, all right? Now, obviously, there are different ins and outs of the issue, such as, is it permissible to masturbate and look at pornography? That's different. The ulama, they're not talking about that. They're not talking about you looking at a woman who's ajnabiyya, that you're not supposed to be looking at naked, or another man in his aura naked with a woman and you masturbating. That's totally outside of the what? Discussion. That's not on the table of the speech of the ulama. That's haram, because you're looking at things that you're not supposed to be looking at. About clearness, or listening to something that you're not supposed to be what? Listening to, which arouses you and causes a person to fall into masturbation. About clear on this? Well, that's one issue. And it's one of the problems with those who say that it is permissible to masturbate. When you start masturbating, then people, they what? Start looking at things they're not supposed to look at. And then it's a problem. Everybody understand? So there's no doubt that's the safest thing to do. Everybody understand this? Another branch, last but not least, we'll mention, is the ruling of masturbation with regards to one's wife or one's husband. One may say, I'm not looking at pornography. I'm married. This is part of foreplay. This is part of me and my wife being together. Is it permissible? So on and so forth. That's another issue as well. Khairan, inshallah. So therefore, I would advise brothers in prison not to masturbate and to avoid masturbation. If they feel that it's a fitna that they cannot bear and they fall into something worse and more ugly, perhaps that's a different story. What's important is to be patient. It's to fast. It's to stay beneficial, bidnillahi ta'ala, with that, to stay busy with that which is beneficial. And if you fight your desires long enough and hard enough, bidnillahi ta'ala, they will, inshallah ta'ala, be settled. Inshallah. Okay? And some of the most calm people that you may meet are people who have life in prison. Some of the most calm and relaxed people. Rather, people who don't have, or who are not in prison for life. If you haven't met a brother who's locked up for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. I met a brother once, an older brother in West Philadelphia, who was locked up for 41 years. Did 41 years in jail. Everybody understand this? And there are other people as well. You find people are calm and relaxed because they've accepted what the reality is. I'm here to stay. There's no point in me fighting and punching the wall and going crazy. Submit to what's decreed, make the best out of the situation, and be thankful that I didn't end up with a bullet in my head or a knife stuffed or shanked in the side of my ribs or whatever else state I could have died in. So just the concept of the mind controlling the body and you being in control of your mind. As we were asked the other day by the sisters in the sisters class, what do you say about those who say that Islam promotes mind control or religion promotes mind control? Religion, especially Islam, does promote mind control, yes. To be in control of your mind and to control your thoughts. And if you get an evil thought, seek Allah's refuge, as Allah tells in the Quran. If the shaitan whispers to you, Allah says, فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ. Seek Allah's refuge. Khairan, inshallah. Wallahu alam. Abu Sa'id.
Saeed was in class and he wanted me to ask, he had mentioned that black stone was a rock that fell from heaven. Is it that it turned black from the narrative, the stories that we hear, it turned black from the people touching it, and their sins touching the rock, and it turned black?
Question regarding the black stone, a rock that came from heaven and it turned black because of the sins of the people. From that which I know, this was stated by Abdullah ibn Abbas, radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, in which he said that it turned black because of the people's sins. Allah knows best. It's a very serious narration if you think about it. If that sins can turn a rock a different color, then what about your heart? Wallahu alam. Faddal.
initials JW from Washington, D.C., United States. How does one abort salah for emergency or for other unavoidable reasons? Is it a perform same if it's followed or sunnah prayer?
Question is, how do you abort salat for an emergency? It depends on that emergency. If something you see is about to happen that's very dangerous, you might just run towards it. You see somebody falling down the steps, or a baby picking up a sharp knife or something like this, a fire, something really, a really bad emergency. But obviously she's asking about, or he's asking about the proper way. I would say the best thing to do is to make the taslim on both sides. The best thing to do is to make the taslim on both sides and not just on one side. That's the best thing to do, and that's the safest way to abort your salah. Make your intention to leave the salah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and handle your emergency. Wallahu alam.
Initials AD from New Zealand. Luden. If two people come upon an alley and only one can enter at a time, is it the sunnah for the elder to enter or the one on the right?
Question says, from New Zealand, Luden, New Zealand, if two people come upon an alley and only one can enter at a time, who should go first? The right or the left? If it was me, I would put the elder first, because it's not necessarily obligatory and mandatory to go with the right. It's not necessarily fard, wajib, that you have to go on the right side. But the general concept of respecting elders, giving them the rights that they deserve, and making them feel good and making them feel honorable and honored, that's what I would do. And I would allow the elderly brother or the elderly sister to say, no, you go first, you're on the right. Everybody clear on this? Give them the chance and the choice to decide who goes first. Now, give them the seniority. I say, no, Sheikh Amin, I'm supposed to pour you tea. If he refuses and says, no, I'm going to pour it, then that's a different story. But I'm not going to just wait for him. No, I'm going to make an attempt. Even though I may have, let's say hypothetically, so if you had, hypothetically, let's say I have some type of virtue over him. Hypothetically, not saying that I do, but let's say if I did, which he should pour me tea, I'm going to humble myself and make him say, you have the virtue that I have to pour the tea. Everybody understand this? I'm going to give him the chance to dominate the situation. Everybody understand this? Wallahu alam. Now I'm shaking. That's only hypothetically.
There's Brother Muhammad from Seattle, Washington. Can you consume food which is cooked with wine?
Question says, from Seattle, Washington, can you consume food which is cooked with wine? The safest thing to do is to avoid it. Stay away from it. There are 1,000 different dishes and things that you can eat. They don't have wine in them. All right, whether it's a seafood dish or whether it's fish and chips, there are different alternatives that people have to beer inside of traditional fish and chip batter. Alternatives, that's the best thing to do. However, just because something is best or something is safest does not mean that the opposite is incorrect. And the ulama of Islam, they differ on what should be followed and what type of fatwa should be given. Al-ittiba' al-arshad aw alladhi dalla alayhi dalil. To follow that which is strictest, or that which is closest and safest, or that which is proven. Everybody understand that which is what? That which is proven. So therefore, we mentioned the safest thing is to avoid it and make an alternative. However, somebody says this doesn't have an alternative, or I don't want an alternative, or is it permissible or not? We say that the concept of alcohol, and is alcohol impure or pure, is something that the ulama of Islam, they differ on. The majority of them say that alcohol itself is najis. The actual essence of alcohol is najis, and not just immorally filthy or morally filthy, but they say it's actually physically what? Impure. As we've explained and answered before, that the alcohol itself, the actual liquid, is what? Is najis. If I did this with alcohol, I would have to wash my finger. Everybody clear on this? I didn't drink it, but they say that the actual essence, the actual liquid itself is what? Like urine. It's najis. It has to be washed. That's the view of most of the fuqaha of Islam. So if khamr is najis, then obviously you can't cook with it. It's like you putting urine in your food. cooking with it. And we know one cannot drink urine. One is not to avoid, or what rujis fahjur. Allah says in the Quran, avoid the rujis, filth. Everybody clear on this or not? So therefore, that's one way of looking at it. The next way of looking at it is the intoxication. When you make shrimp scampi or some type of lobster dish or something like that with seafood, do you still taste the alcohol? And if you have 3 bowls or 3 plates, will you get drunk? Will you get tipsy? If you do get drunk and you can taste it and you can be affected by alcohol, then that's clear as well. Everybody understand this? Khairan inshallah. As far as the view of the ulama that states that alcohol is not physically impure, it's spiritually impure, morally impure, but itself is not necessarily impure. Everybody understand this? Then they say you can cook with it because it's just like water. It's a pure substance. You drinking a cup is a different story. Everybody understand this? You getting drunk is a different story, but the actual khamr itself is pure. Everybody understand this? And then the concept when it comes to culinary arts, cooking, when it comes to different people that are chefs, if you talk to them and you ask them the question, they differ. Some of them will say that all of the alcohol is burnt out. It doesn't remain. And others will say, no, some of it does remain in the pot. You can taste it. Everybody clear on this? Or another way of looking at it, we may look at the percentage of alcohol and how much does it take to get a person drunk, the average person. Everybody clear on this? And what is left, what remains when you deep fry fish and frying grease, hot grease. How much beer is left? How much beer can you taste? If you ate 5 pieces of fish, are you going to get drunk? If you ate 6 pieces of fillet of fish, are you going to get intoxicated or not? So this is a critical way of looking at the issue. What's important, the safest thing is to avoid it. To say that it's haram with those details, I won't say that. Wallahu alam.
This was AR from Texas, United States. Does accidentally touching your backside break your wudu?
Question says, does accidentally touching your backside break wudu? To keep things simple, hopefully it doesn't. Inshallah, no. Inshallah, no. There are many details from the people of knowledge with regards to touching one's private part. Does it break the wudu or not? If it does break the wudu, is it just the palm of your hand or the back of your hand? If you just touch your penis or your vagina, is your buttocks different? There's details. If someone else touches your private part, if you touch a baby's private part, there's all tafasil that are well known and mentioned in the books of fiqh. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala, if you accidentally touch your backside, hopefully your wudu is not broken. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Wallahu alam. Fadal Sheikh.
From Ontario, Canada. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. I'm a sister that would like to become an Islamic counselor for women and children. What are the credentials / education needed to become an Islamic counselor?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. One of the sisters from Ontario, Toronto, Ontario, becoming an Islamic counselor. May Allah bless you in that. May Allah reward you for your good intention. Alhamdulillah, that's a good thing. And it's something that most people don't want to do. Most people aspire to be lawyers and doctors and engineers, basketball players, football players, cricket players. That's what most people aspire to do. Businessmen. And only a few people aspire to take the path of the messengers, the prophets and the messengers. Hadihi sabili. He says, my path, my way. Adu ilallah. I call to Allah. That's the way of the prophets and the messengers, to help people out. So therefore, if you want to be a professional counselor on a professional level, then you have to get the Islamic education, and you also have to get the professional training as well in the secular sciences with regards to counseling, psychology, and things like this. As far as if you want to be a counselor on a smaller scale, not in a professional realm, you're part of this masjid or this center, and you don't necessarily take it to a bigger next level, then that's a different story. That's a different story. What's important is you yourself, you have to know the basic things of Islam, just like everybody else does. A counselor is no different than a scholar is no different than a carpenter is no different than a bread maker. Every single Muslim is supposed to know the basic ABCs of the deen. Obviously, we live in 2017, a time and a place, or especially a time in which the dunya is just a huge, huge, huge totem pole that scrapes the sky. It's just so big and so tall, the dunya. money, wealth, car, clothes, music, games, the dunya, the dunya, the dunya. And it's become such a big tyrant that it has pushed most of us from learning the basics of Islam. Not a scholar, no, the basic fundamentals. Many of us are ignorant. We don't even know the basics of wudu, the basics of Hajj, the basics of Ramadan, the basics of marriage and divorce, and that's sad. So every single Muslim is supposed to know the basics of the deen. Everybody, from the peasant to the noble. Everybody understand this? Quote unquote. Quote unquote. Everybody understand this? As far as if you wish to put yourself into some position of status and power and helping the people out, then obviously you have to have a little more. You have to know a bit more. And you don't necessarily have to know about fiqh and this and that, but you have to know a bit more of the Quran, a bit more of the hadiths. You have to have a detailed knowledge of the seerah and what the Prophet did in this situation and what he didn't do and what the Sahaba went through and the different ayat about the woman who came to the Prophet, the man who went to the Prophet, the old woman, the celibate, and the kala kala. These different life stories in the Quran. That's my advice, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Also, I would advise you, I would say from necessary credentials, is that you be well familiar with the books of Ibn Qayyim, Ibn Taymiyyah. Familiarize yourself with the works of Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Qayyim in English. Familiarize yourself with those books. You don't have to memorize them, study all of them, but familiarize yourself with those books, especially Ibn Qayyim. Especially Ibn Qayyim. Last but not least, I would say you should know the basics of social matters, the basics of psychology, the basics of substance abuse, the basics of domestic abuse. You have to have a general library. Nothing to do with Islam now. Nothing to do with what? Islam now. We're talking about non-Muslim books. Everybody understand this? Yes. I like how some people say, oh, you can't read a non-Muslim book. You can't read a novel. You can't read a storybook. Nah. Once you have a library, a section of your library, not Ibn Kathir, not Ibn Qayyim, not Ibn Taymiyyah, but of secular sciences pertaining to drug abuse, pertaining to domestic abuse, pertaining to gangs. You understand this? Pertaining to peer pressure, pertaining to all these different things that the people are afflicted with. And you don't have to spend all of your time in those books, but you have to be familiar with those books and know the general agreed upon principles. So you can help them out from the Islamic point of view and the worldly point of view. Rather, I would say to do what? Merge them together. Everybody understands to do what? Merge them together. Everybody clear on this? And then if you have that, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, you can be a counselor, inshallah. Last but not least, even though I just said that, I would advise you to seek to become the protege of somebody. Let somebody put you under their wing. An older sister, an older brother, and study with them and learn with them on how to actually do it. Everybody understand this? Every imam, every leader of a center should have disciples that not only learn the actual theoretical information, but eat lunch with him and travel with him and see how it's done, hands-on, apprenticeship, disciplism, as we say. Everybody understand this? And bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, hopefully, internship, they say, right? 2, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and you know how to do it yourself. Khair, inshallah. As far as if you want to do it professionally, then I would say go to school. Get a degree, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, in these different types of relations and affairs. Get a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree. Get an online degree as well from the Islamic school and merge what? Merge them both. Wallahu ta'ala alam. The Muslims are in dire need of professionals. The Muslims are in dire need of professionals. And the word professional doesn't just mean a degree. The word professional doesn't just mean talking in a certain way. It means everything, how you behave, how you conduct yourself. Professional. Muslims are in need of this. Wallahu alam. Shaykh Amin.
What are the most virtuous things to ask for tahajjud?
What are the most virtuous things to ask for?
Yes.
Question says, what are the most virtuous things to ask for in tahajjud? We say that there's 2 ways of making dua. 2 ways of making dua, in tahajjud and outside of tahajjud. The first way is to supplicate how the Prophet supplicated. It's to say the specific du'as that he used to make. Asking Allah to make his heart firm. Asking Allah for pardon and forgiveness. Asking Allah for good in this life and hereafter. The specific ad'iyah. The specific du'as of the Prophet. So the hadiths that tell us this is what the Prophet said in the tahajjud. And this is what he told the companions to say when they made this qunut, so on and so forth. That's one thing. After that is anything that you feel is most significant and most substantial to you in your life. Asking Allah for, oh Allah, give me good health, that way I can worship you longer. Ask Allah to give you the sabr upon your children or your wife or your husband. Whatever you feel is most significant in your life. And whatever you feel is the greatest virtue and the biggest thing that you look forward to in hereafter. Oh Allah, please protect me from the punishment in the grave. I'm afraid of that. Oh Allah, please allow me to see you in hereafter. I worshiped you my whole life. I want to see your noble face. Wahakala. So there's a specific way and then there's the general way. The specific way is well known in the books of hadith, Fortress of the Muslim, the supplications the Prophet used to make when he prayed at night, and the supplications that he told the companions to make when they prayed at night. Then after that, whatever you want of this life and of the hereafter, but you have to prioritize. You have to what? Prioritize. So let's make an example of this. When I was younger, maybe 17, 18, I would make dua in my sujood for Allah to allow me to go to Medina University. And when I pray, that's the dua that I would make. Alhamdulillah, it came true. Everybody understand this? Whether my dua was answered or not is destiny. We know that it's decreed. It happened. So to me, at that time, that was the most, at that time. That was the most virtuous thing to me at what? At that time. Somebody may come in from a sinner, and he feels that I've drunk alcohol for such a long time. Can Allah forgive me? Will Allah forgive me? Well, how can that? Or a person may be troubled with regards to his children. I'm getting older. I have diabetes. I have cancer. I'm sick. I have a son left. What is my son going to do? What is he going to be? You understand what I'm saying to you? Religion, the deen, let alone the family business. So that may be the most virtuous thing to you. Wallahu alam. Khalid.
The question is, when I think of a sutra, it's something that's on the floor like this. Can a curtain that droops down be a sutra?
Question says, when I think of a sutra, I think of something that's like standing up, like 3D.
Yeah, like
something that's erect, directly in front of you.
Yeah, on the floor.
On the floor. Can it be a curtain that drapes down? Yes. It could be something that's hanging down. There's nothing wrong with that. It could be a curtain. Okay. It could be a stick that's hanging down, a pole that's coming down. What's important is that something that's between you and the people that have to walk in front of you. Something between you and those who wish to what? Walk in front of you. So, obviously, the sutra that's a curtain is going to be like a wall. It's like a what? It's like a wall. So it depends on where the people are. If there's a walkway, let's say this was a curtain, and I pray in front of the curtain. It's not a wall. I can just blow it and push it. But when it's still, it acts as if it's a what? A wall. It's like a barrier. I can pray in front of the curtain as long as people don't come in front of me and the curtain. Everybody understand this? And the main purpose of the sutra, first and foremost, is to follow the sunnah. Before you get into the wisdom of it, it's ittiba' sunnah. This is Muhammad. That's what he did. And secondly, is to increase your concentration, to increase your submissiveness, and to allow people to know that you're praying, do not walk in front of me. And this is my sacred ground in which no one can come between me and my sutra. So whatever suits that purpose, there can be a sutra. Wallahu alam. Fadal akhi.
The difference between drop shipping, which like I found some say is haram because you're selling that which you don't possess. The difference between that and bay or salam, I believe it's called, I see that they resemble each other.
Okay.
So is drop shipping really haram?
Right. The Prophet ﷺ, he forbade لا تبيع ما ليس عندك. The hadith tells us, don't sell that which you do not have. Don't sell that which you what? Don't have. And then we have other types of buying and selling, whether it's bay or salam or salaf, loaning certain things, making a deal for a future transaction. Naam? Everybody clear on this? Does that mean that it isn't really haram? If the Prophet ﷺ did both or said both or allowed both, then it can't be a contradiction. There can't be a what? Contradiction. However, there are certain things, certain times, and certain products in which there may be an exception. There may be a what? An exception. Such as when we talk about the prohibition of bartering dates, different types of dates, dry dates with wet dates, fresh dates, or knowing how many dates are there, guessing. And he allowed certain things that were in the actual palm trees to estimate how much they were. In other words, do we have things that are clearly haram as an asl, and then we have certain what? Exceptions. But you're not supposed to sell that which you do not own. That is clear. Certain times and instances in which it is an exception to the rule, Do not change the what? Original rule, which is clearly established in the authentic hadith. Do not sell that which you do not possess. If you're an agent, that's one thing. You make a deal, you make a contract for someone, that's what? That's one thing. But you're not to sell that which you really don't have. Because what happens when you can't get it? Everybody understand this? And the other wisdoms as well. So that's in brief. Wallahu a'lam. Fadl Nafis.
Yusuf, Tariq ibn Bilal, Flint, Michigan. May Allah bless you and preserve you and your family. I have stepchildren ranging in age between 2 and 11 years old from 2 wives. What are the limits of the children's interactions and the interactions of the young male children with my wives that aren't their mother?
Question regarding having 2 wives and having stepchildren from both wives, ranging from 2 to 11. What's the extent of their interaction with each other? Obviously, at 11 years old, a girl could be in puberty, or a boy could be in puberty. Maybe 10, maybe 9. Some people may be before that. But in most cases, I can't say in most cases, Allahu Alam, but in many cases, the average child, in many cases, is not necessarily in puberty yet. But their bodies are starting to develop. Obviously, this depends on the genealogy, where you come from, what type of food you eat, what type of climate you live in. Everybody understand this? So some people, an 11-year-old girl is still a tiny little baby girl. And in some places, or some cultures, or races, or times, 11-year-old girl is starting to develop into a young woman. So that depends on what is their status and stature. Is your 11-year-old stepson or stepdaughter in puberty? That's one thing. If they're not yet in puberty, then they're still considered little kids. And they're allowed to see each other and play with each other. However, there are general etiquettes regardless. You may have a 4-year-old son. They don't necessarily have to be naked in front of the son. You may have a little stepson, and you take him to see his your second wife, his stepmother. And you teach her this is your stepmother. She loves you, so on and so forth. And you also teach her that you're not a girl. She puts on makeup. You don't put on makeup. Everybody understand this? She wears a dress. You don't wear that type of dress. She has on bangles and gold. You tell them at a young age, 6, 7, young son, men don't wear gold. That's for women. Why get that? Why get that? So there are always etiquettes, no matter how old the child is. There are always what? There's always etiquette. The etiquette is about being by yourself. Is it permissible to be naked when you're by yourself and walk around naked by yourself, let alone in front of a child, and to say certain things? So there are always etiquettes. However, if they're 2 to 11, the general rule, they can see each other. They can eat at one table. They can sleep in one bed. Obviously, there are details with regards to separating the bed. What's meant by that? وَفَرِّقُوا بَيْنَهُمْ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ. Separate the bed, meaning separate the covers. And not necessarily they have to have their own what? Beds. Separating the what? The covers. Everybody clear on this? That's a issue that many people don't understand. We're not talking about that right now. Hold on. What's important is that they're young. They can still play together. They can still eat together. They can still sleep in the bed together. So on and so forth. They can interact with each other. But rather, even when they get older, there are still certain rulings that aren't necessarily haram. And as we said before, many people don't have the proper knowledge and understanding of what is and what isn't free mixing. Ikhtilat. Is free mixing absolutely haram? Is it absolutely permissible? Or are there times in which it's permissible and times in which it is impermissible? These are all my family members, my 2 wives, my sons, my daughters, my stepsons, and my stepdaughters. We all sit together at the table. She's in puberty, she's of age. We'll all sit together at the table. Is that permissible? No one is uncovered. Can we sit and eat together, or do we have to women here and men there? That's a long issue in itself. Wallahu a'lam.
Safe Deen, Belgium. What should Muslim do when halal slaughter on Eid al-Adha is banned here?
Question that comes from Belgium. What should Muslims do when halal slaughter is banned on Eid al-Adha? For Allah, to the best of your ability. There are many things that you can't do in Belgium that is from the deen. Other things that is from the deen here in America that we can't do. So we can't do it. It's just that simple. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. For Allah, to the best of your capability. certain things that are from the most virtuous acts of the deen that you may not have what, Sufyan? The ability to do in the country in which you're living in. That doesn't mean that you leave off the other acts. So bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, what I would advise, if you cannot slaughter the animal yourself, then at least go buy meat. Go buy the halal meat that's imported, inshallah. Buy an abundance of the meat. Maybe you can estimate a cow costs $1,000. I don't know what currency is used there. Let's say $1,000, euros or whatever. Allah Alam, Belgium, what's important? Let's say a cow costs what, Sheikh Amin? $1,000. Method. So we can't slaughter here in New York City. It's prohibited. It's inhumane and it's barbaric. Okay, no problem. Bye. So I'm going to spend $1,000 at the what? At the halal meat store. And I'm going to buy a load of beef. Many bags of halal beef. And I'm going to take a third for myself, a third for my friends, and a third for the poor Muslims in Belgium. As if I did what? Slaughtered the cow. Everybody clear on this? A goat, a sheep, buffalo, bison, whatever animal that you're slaughtering for adha. Everybody clear on this or not? So I think, Salih, that this is a sensible and logical solution. What do you think? The best thing that you can do, nah? Wallahu alam. Abu Naila, fadl.
Argument below, Flint, Michigan. Asked for advice. His 4-year-old stepdaughter has realized her private parts has sensation. They are very worried, but she is very young. Please advise.
With regards to the question comes from Flint, Michigan. Someone realized that a 4-year-old girl understands now that her private part has sensation. They're afraid. Please advise. Teach your child. Teach the young girl. That's your private part. Okay, it has sensation. And that's it. Don't play with yourself. Don't touch your private part unless you're using the bathroom. And don't let no one else touch your private part. Not your friend, not your stepdaughter, your stepsister, your sister, or not stepdaughter, that's slip of the tongue. Whatever the case may be. Your teacher, nobody touches your private part. Nobody. Except for your ummi. And you teach them this. And if the child forgets or if the child does it or touch itself, and you take your hand away and you forbid them from that. And you teach them. It's just that simple. Make dua for them. Oh Allah, bless my young daughter, bless my stepdaughter. Please allow her to be righteous. And that's it. Having a child is steps and stages. They grow. They go through different phases. Children, they go through lying phases. Now, you have a little son. He's always lying about everything. It doesn't mean he's going to grow up to be a liar. It does not mean that. He did it. She did it. He's lying. Or he may have a stealing phase or a fighting phase. Or other things that children what? Go through, growing pains. So sometimes you can't necessarily try to stop them. Sometimes you just let it what? Let it ride out. But you tell them the right thing. And eventually they'll grow out of it. If it continues and it's a problem, then that's a different story. That's a what? That's a different story. So the general rule is to be careful who you have your children around. Be careful what you allow your children to watch and listen to. Be careful what you do in front of your children. And most things that are of bad habits, the children learn from their parents. And most bad habits that children pick up, they learn at a young age from their parents. From a young age at their parents. There are many people today, many brothers and sisters, they have 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds. My son is this, my sister is that, my brother help me, Sheikh, son. I don't think that is just what you're trying to make it to seem. My son is this, my son is that. He maybe he's possessed, maybe Kevin, maybe he saw you doing something when he was younger. Maybe he's picking up from some of your bad habits. And if that's the case, you can't change the past, but you have to be patient. You went to the bar for all of those years out of your life, and you're drunk. And now your son, he starts drinking. It's not okay for him to drink. You have to tell him, you have to warn him, but you have to do what? Be patient. Just like Allah was patient with you. Wallahu alam.
If your parents are not Muslim and they have a credit card which clearly has interest on it, and they send you out with the credit card to use it to purchase something, would that be permissible? Because if you swipe it, it's like a contract with interest.
Question says you have non-Muslim parents or maybe even Muslim parents and they have a credit card and they send you to buy something, a person with a credit card has interest on it and you swipe it. Does that mean you're making a contract of interest? First and foremost, Alhamdulillah, Mufti Q&A Volume 1. We answered the question regarding credit cards in the US. And alhamdulillah, we gave good detail. And I don't think, and Allah knows best, from my limited knowledge and research, from what I saw online and in the books, I don't think no one has given that detail regarding credit cards in an English source, even in an Arabic source. And that's a praise for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no boasting. I don't think that there's been that detail that's been mentioned about the ins and outs of a credit card. Okay, so please go back to that book if you can. As far as now, if you consider the credit card to be totally haram, you consider it to be totally haram, whether you pay the interest or not, al-muhim, you consider it to be totally riba, then that's one thing. Just because you consider it haram and they pay the interest doesn't mean it's haram for you to take something that comes from that credit card. But you going to the store and swiping it may be something that's at least, at best, dodgy. But if, let's say, someone bought you a glass, a tea glass, with a credit card, doesn't necessarily mean haram for you to take the glass. Or you have a store and someone buys a tea glass and they swipe with the card, doesn't mean that it's haram for you to take that wealth. But you yourself taking the card and using it based off of what you believe that the credit card is totally haram may be something that's problematic. So if you can avoid it. And obviously, as we just hinted out, there are many, many details regards to money today and economics. Credit card, debit card, dollar bills, many, many what? Details. What's important is stick with what you believe and what you understand and what you know to be the haqq in your heart. And don't use it unless you have to. Don't use it what? Unless you have to, unless it's a necessity. Wallahu a'lam. Adam?
Just follow up on the question about the splitting of the meat, one third, is that mandatory?
It's not mandatory. Not mandatory.
Abu Hafsa from Houston, Texas. Is covering the ankles a must for socks to be wiped over?
Question from Houston, Texas. Is covering the socks a must for socks to... Is covering the ankles a must for socks to be wiped over? It's the safest thing to do. I don't believe that it's mandatory nor a condition. But it's the safest thing to do. But if a brother had on ankle socks that were beneath his ankle and he wiped over them, I do not consider it to be fard for them to come over the ankles. Me personally, I wouldn't do it. But I don't consider it to be mandatory. It's the safest thing to have the socks at least above the ankles. Wallahu alam.
Vinicius AR from South Texas. Is the hadith of teaching your kids till they are a certain age, 10 years old, then you become their friend? Is that hadith authentic?
Never heard about it. Allahu alam. Teach about teaching your hadith, teaching your children to become 10 years old, then you become their friend. La adri. I don't know. Never heard that hadith.
Initials AB from Edmonton. How did the Salaf deal with waswas al-tahri?
Right now, we're going to have to stop, or it's time for the salah. Please forgive us. Please excuse us for falling short and not having enough time to answer your questions. Perhaps some questions we answered with too much detail and too much time. In the next session, we'll try to summarize the answers to at least cover your questions. Bi-idhnillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah Azza wa Jal surely knows best. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Jazakumullah khairan.